everybody have different challenges in their lives. So. Oh, excellent. So, unfortunately, record starts later on after our opening remarks, but believe me, it was a very strong message to our future community. So, um, uh, my name is Natalia Kloos. I'm a Black Sea Women in Nuclear Network coordinator. Our network is generally new, and our mission is to connect, support, and empower women in nuclear fields. So we are joining 6 countries around the Black Sea, as you understand. And it's a regional network. It's Ukraine, Moldova, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, and Georgia. And we support our partner Ecogeneration in this interesting topic about ecological to critical infrastructure. Me personally, I was introduced to critical infrastructure in 2014 when war starts in Ukraine, and I was working in the Ministry of Energy of Ukraine, and our good friend, Mr. Suhodolia, he was participated in NATO drills about how to actually, what will happen when big war starts and how would energy survive. And NATO drills shows actually that all energy shut down. And in couple 2 years, we actually organized the same drills in Ukraine. I would say also the same results, but from that period, we actually started the discussion about the importance of protection of critical infrastructure. Now we have national law in Ukraine about protection of critical infrastructure, and some systems are building in Ukraine, our facility objects actually start to be protected in wartime. It's very interesting how it happened, and I think later there will be many cases. But as a understanding that we are all family living one planet, we are cooperate with each other, we understand that it's not enough to talk about critical infrastructure, about energy, I know, technique, whatever. The important is to talk about also ecology, because we are breathing, we are eating, we are drinking, and this is what about us. But about environment, it's also environment suffering from all our activity. War in Ukraine raised all those issues, and unfortunately, we see also all consequences. And there is no other thing that it can't touch us. It touches very hard. It's not only Ukraine, because Ukraine is located geographically on the middle, on the heart of Europe, so everything is connected. That's why we are decided to raise this issue to talk together about ecological critical infrastructure, Ukraine, Europe, because unfortunately, everything what is happening in Ukraine is now is really facing to all Europe. So we will have today 2 sessions: influence of the Russian armed aggression on the climate change, and Ukraine, Europe is a single ecological complex problems of preservation of critical ecological. So all our speakers from Ukraine, from civil society, from state institutions. And
Мы можем их показать нашим присутствующим.
Они там видят.
А мы их не видим.
Зараз побачимо. And I would like to ask to turn on camera to all our participants who is online. We can take a picture if you don't mind. And okay, somebody has a nice kitchen. I like this. Dear all, if you don't mind. We will have a beautiful picture here in Brussels, thanks to the Ukrainian Civil Society Hub and all participants who is here. But also we want to have some memorable picture from online participants too. And after this, we are going to start our program. turn it to microphone, and also we want to be good participants and listening to each other. Please turn off your phones during presentation. Okay, so I will ask Mr. Mr. It's the right way to say it's a Doctor of Engineering Ivanuta. To be ready for the presentation. Dr. Ivanuta is a senior researcher of the National Institute for Strategic Studies since 2011. His institute is a basic research institution for scientific and analytical support of the activities of the President of Ukraine and the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, also as a consultative and advisory body under the President of Ukraine. Mr. Ivanuta dealt with the problems of improving the state policy in the field of environmental security, taking into account the impact of Russian aggression, adaptation to global climate change, in particular the study of priorities for ensuring environmental security in the military conflict zone in eastern Ukraine, as components of the formation of the state environmental protection program in the context of the reintegration of temporarily occupied territories. Currently, Dr. Ivanuta research focused on the assessing of consequences of the large-scale armed aggression of the Russian Federation for the ecological security of Ukraine, sustaining the priorities of neutralizing threats to ecological security in the conditions of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine. So he is the author of more than 60 scientific publications and co-author of 3 monographs. So, Dr. Ivanuta, I will ask you to start sharing your screen and start your presentation.
Коль, ты бесперебойно отправлял? Этот один, когда включаешь, 3 часа можно отключать. 3 часа. Не было возможности. Ну, тут вариант такой, либо каждые 3 часа его включать.
Screen sharing is in progress.
Yes, it looks like it takes a little bit long time.
How much time do we need to screen sharing?
I don't know. I'm also curious.
Okay.
I can start sharing from. If you can stop for your sharing, I can start mine if you want. If you will send me your presentation, I can start sharing. Или где? О. Пане Іваню, то вам треба було назвати ту синю картинку. Ви її натиснули, ту синю картинку? Вашу саму презентацію? Для того, щоб шаритися, вона повинна бути відкрита. О, все, чудово. У вас 15 хвилин.
Okay. Good afternoon. I'd like to thank the organizers of this meeting for inviting me here today. In my presentation, I would like to report on the most actual threats to environmental security of Ukraine from Russian military aggression. Also, I'd like to
Да, я
give
тоже
you
говорят, ничего не
some
слышно.
overview of the basic aspects of critical infrastructure protection in Ukraine with regard to environmental protection. After that, I'd like to clarify some of the threats to environmental security of Ukraine, including dangerous situation on Kakhovska hydroelectric power plant, and of course, impact on Russian military aggression on water security and climate change. Since the beginning of the large-scale invasion of Russian troops into Ukraine, the environment of our country has been under constant destructive influence from the new threats to environmental security. And the first aspects to point out is the list of threats to environmental security. Among them, I'd like to mention the problems with access to drinking water in regions of Ukraine affected by war, land contamination from mining, capture and destruction of critical infrastructure objects, formation of waste from war, problems with restoration of land resources and ensuring environmental safety in wartime conditions, and impact of Russian military aggression on climate change. The next, I'd like to give you a brief overview of legal aspects in the field of critical infrastructure protection in Ukraine. We have law of Ukraine on critical infrastructure, which was amended in October last year. This law defines the legal and organizational principles for the creation and operation of national critical infrastructure protection system. And definition of critical infrastructure in this law is a set of infrastructure objects, systems, their part and their totality, which are important for the economy, national security and defense, the malfunction of which can harm vital national interest. There is a list of critical infrastructure sectors, which was approved by the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine, dated December 16, 2022. And regarding the environmental protection, I'm here to present this table, which represents the sector, subsector, types of basic service, and sectoral body in the field of critical infrastructure protection. And here we see the sector of protection of the environment. And there are three subsectors, which includes management, use and reproduction of surface water resources, development of water management, management of radioactive waste, and protection, rational use and reproduction of objects of the nature reserve fund. And one of the most important type of basic service is the ensuring the satisfaction of needs for population and sectors of the economy in water resources. Also, I'd like to mention the construction and reconstruction of protection systems against the harmful effects of water supply and sewage system, hydrotechnical structures, water management facilities. The next thing I'd like to mention is the dangerous situation at the Kakhovska HPP, because due to the uncontrolled discharge of water, the water level in the Kakhovsky reservoir is rapidly decreasing as the volume of discharge exceeds the volume of filling. Because of this dangerous situation, large settlements that take water from the lower Briv, in particular Energodar, Melitopol, and Berdyansk, have already faced the problem of water supply today. Currently, those cities are under temporary occupation, so we cannot influence such dangerous situation. Also, the significant decrease in the water level in the Kakhovsky Reservoir has a negative impact on the technical processes at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power station. After the partial destruction and deliberate opening by the Russian forces of the locks of Kakhovskaya HPP, we are losing thousands of cubic meters of water every day. As a result, some of the settlements that receive water from Dnipro River may be left without access to drinking water. Of course, this situation is very dangerous because about 70% of population in our country is dependent on the water from Dnipro. The next things I would like to mention is the issue of impact of Russian military aggression on water safety. And I'd like to mention that military action in Ukraine have led to the destruction of water and electricity networks, as a result of which more than 4.6 million people face various restrictions on access to water. A total of over 6 million people in Ukraine struggle for drinking water every day. The biggest problems with drinking water arose where the technical facilities of water utilities were destroyed or damaged. Water resources and hydrotechnical structures are increasingly becoming objects of attacks or are themselves used as a means of war. Also, I'd like to address the problem of impact of Russian military aggression on climate change. Combat actions due to Russian military aggression against Ukraine cause an increase in greenhouse gas emissions due to the increased consumption of petroleum products by military equipment. Almost 4 million tons of CO2 entered the atmosphere during the 150 days of a full-scale invasion. This is 10 times more than the emissions of military equipment in Ukraine for the entire year 2021. Also, according to the data from Ministry of Environment Protection, at least 33 million tons of CO2 equivalent emissions were recorded because of the Russians' aggression. Of them, about 8.9 million tons of CO2 equivalent comes from hostilities. About 1 million tons of CO2 equivalent comes from the movement of internally displaced persons, and the biggest number is more than 23.4 million tons comes from various fires. Potential indirect emissions of greenhouse gases due to need for post-war reconstruction are estimated at about 48.7 million tons. As the recommendations, I would like to mention that there is a need information under the auspices of international organizations, a special mission for environmental monitoring of greenhouse gas emissions as a result of Russian aggression, determine the possibility of including all types of military emissions in the conditions of Russian military aggression in the global calculation of greenhouse gases, together with the United Nations and the EU, introduce remote monitoring of large-scale destruction during the war of such objects as urban infrastructure, forest fires, within the framework of the UN Convention on Climate Change. Also, I'd like to mention a short slide about land contamination and degradation because of war. Because as a result of military action, risk of new territories are formed, especially the territories of south and east of Ukraine, which are partially under occupation as a result of military aggression. A lot of ecosystem in Ukraine, including land resources, are subject to destructive influence and degradation. About 44% of the most valuable natural reserves of the state are under temporary occupation. I'm going to conclude my presentation by saying that there are important tasks to perform, which include the following: to provide support for Ukraine's initiative to create a global platform for assessing the damage caused to the environment as a result of military operations, including providing international support in recording and monitoring the environmental consequences of military operation and damage caused by the military aggression of the Russian Federation. Promote the involvement of international partners in the implementation of the peace formula proposed by President of Ukraine by taking the lead and participating in the 8th challenge to combat ecocide. Thank you for your attention.
Dr. Ioannidou, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. You covered many environmental problems that we have right now in Ukraine. It was really good information. I would like to ask to keep your all questions to discussions because we're a little bit out of time. And also, since I was requested from Denis Bohut that he needs to leave earlier, I will ask him right now to make presentation, and later on will be Svetlana Berzina and Svetlana Perminova, if you don't mind. Yes? So while we are starting for sharing presentation of Mr. Denis Bohut, I want to introduce him to our audience. He is the president of the Association of Political Consultants of Ukraine from 2021 till now, and president of Bogus Communication Agency from 2000. He is a strategic communication specialist, political and military expert, columnist, analyst. He is a specialist in the field of information wars, propaganda, and counter-propaganda. He is a doctor of naturopathologist, naturophysiologist, and specialist in longevity medicine. He had training in the political PR in Great Britain, in Conservative Training College, Westminster, organizer of the scientific training conferences on PR and communications technologies, among which are Image of Ukraine, manipulation strategies in politics, economy, and business, and methods of to oppose. I would like to ask Mr. Denis Bohut to take the floor. Did you start to?
Thank you, Natalie. Maybe you try show presentation.
Yes,
Please.
we are showing, yes.
Так. Так. Значит, our presentation names nuclear blackmail as a threat to the ecological security of the planet. Next slide. The planet today has a large number of environmental threats that can affect the development of human civilization. Now there is a war in Ukraine. The Russian Federation aggressively attacked Ukraine. Part of the territories of Ukraine are captured. Land, water, air, forest, fields are under constant attack. Rampant emissions into the atmosphere of rocket and artillery detonation products, dangerous combustion products. Our planet is the only living organism. What is happening in Ukraine, in the heart of Europe, directly affect the ecological safety of the whole of Europe. Next slide. The threat of using nuclear weapons, a method of intimidation of the world community by the leaders, experts, and journalists of the Russian Federation, unacceptable in the 21st century. In today's global world, all people are interconnected and live on the same planet. In order for human civilization to continue to exist and develop, it is necessary to prevent disasters and conflicts together, especially nuclear ones. The countries of the world and international organizations must unite and stop those countries that engage in nuclear blackmail. Next slide. Nuclear weapons used to be in possession of 5 countries: the USA, USSR, Great Britain, China, and France. Today, nuclear arms are no longer exclusive to these 5 nations. Despite the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and possibly Israel have them too. By the way, taking into account the current situation in Ukraine, Israel gets a solid reason not to join the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. For the next decades, it will be able to use Russia's attack on Ukraine as an example of how a decision about any guarantees actually means nothing. Since the violation on the state borders of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin and his army in 2014, the capture and the annexion of Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, the masks have been off. Russia has shown that it is not going to fulfill the agreements on security guarantees for Ukraine and the UN rules on non-violation of state borders. With this fact of aggression, Russia also violated about 400 international treaties and agreements. The world responded with sanctions from the USA and European nations that tried to pacify an aggressor state, but this did not work. On the contrary, Russia began threatening nuclear attacks on the USA. Outright nuclear blackmail has become one of the central tools of Russian foreign policy. This is how Russia deployed nuclear blackmail as multi-level and total in the information space and international politics. On February 24, 2022, Russia treacherously invaded Ukraine, bombing of peaceful towns and villages. Convoys of Russian tanks traveled the road of Ukraine. On February 27, 2022, the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin ordered the Russia's deterrent forces, including strategic nuclear forces, be put on special combat duty. This means that nuclear warheads, mostly tactical ones, must be brought to the carriers, and if the team arrives, they must be installed on the carrier within 6 hours. Russian central TV channels began to make statements by journalist Dmitry Kiselyov on March 18, 2014, in the broadcast of Vesti Недели, who wanted to neutralize the USA into nuclear ashes. Also, the deputy of the State Duma of the Russian Federation, Volodymyr Zhirinovsky, and the director of Carnegie Moscow Center, Dmytro Trenin, threatened with nuclear weapons. Most messages on television include disinformation and distortion of facts. Also, messages of especially frightening content. Russian politicians, journalists, and diplomats regularly use the topic of nuclear blackmail in their rhetoric. According to our research, information bursts on this topic occur every 3 months. That is a statement come out from a famous Russian person, and then various media pick up this topic and spread around the world. Accordingly, the governments of various countries and security organizations react to this information. In addition to intimidation with nuclear weapons, in the media space, Russia's shelling of Ukraine infrastructure facilities has already disrupted the operation of 4 nuclear power plants in Ukraine: Zaporizhia, South Ukrainian, Khmelnytsky, and Rivne. Nuclear waste repositories of the Chernobyl NPP were subject to Russian attacks. The Russian occupiers have already turned to Zaporizhia NPP in Energodar into a time bomb. Frequent disconnection of power supply to the station, lowering of the water levels in cooling tanks, and the shelling of NPP premises are all a direct path to the nuclear disaster that will affect the whole of Europe. If a loaded gun is pointed at you, at some point it will actually fire. This should be kept in mind. In this situation, the person who drove and pointed the gun is usually supposed to be shot to kill before they open fire. Such preventive action can save lives. Russia does this very often and always with impunity. This behavior of a terrorist country looks into only trugish, but also catastrophically dangerous for the entire human civilization. The behavior of terrorists who act this peculiar way to achieve these sinister goals. Nuclear intimidation is a crime. Intimidation and blackmail involving nuclear weapons, planning and announcing as very possibility of nuclear attacks on peaceful cities is, in my opinion, the most serious war crime existing in the world today. This should be recognized by the international community. Russia is intensifying its nuclear blackmail, and the possibility of a preemptive nuclear strike cannot be ruled out. Recently, the UN and NATO have been very reluctant to respond to regular statements by Russian officials, experts, and journalists about the possibly use of nuclear arms. The national security strategies of the world leading powers do not work and are being leveled through such nuclear blackmail. The IAEA, a specialized organization in the nuclear field, the struggling to deal with Russia's gun antics against Ukraine nuclear reactors. Meanwhile, the threat of nuclear weapons actually being used in growing by months. On February 21, in a speech to the Federal Assembly, Vladimir Putin announced the cancellation of the agreement between Russia and the United States on the reduction and the elimination of strategic offensive weapons and instructed Rosatom to prepare for new nuclear tests. This is another escalation of the part of Russia. How should this nuclear blackmail by Russia be assessed? First, it must be taken seriously. A country that has nuclear weapons in its arsenal can actually use them. Second, such blackmail must be seen as internationally unacceptable, and it is necessary to do everything so that such a player who behaves inappropriately loses the very element of blackmail. When the agenda is to destroy our entire planet, such behavior poses a risk to the survival of our entire civilization. All countries should condemn such behavior and make sure that Russia loses its nuclear arms. There has already been a precedent. Ukraine handed over its nuclear weapons and elimination and the launchers. Third, Collective Security Organization NATO Act should include their strategies response to systemic intimidation and blackmail by Russia involving nuclear weapons. The systemic pressure on Russia on the part of the international community must be total, adequate, and immediate. Fourth, new formats of collective security organizations are required in which a nuclear threat will be most important factor. They need to be monitored. Does the manufacture, proliferation, and use of nuclear weapons will be under control? That for none of these apocalypse scenarios we see in the movies to ever come true. This is our responsibility before our children and our civilization. No, thank you for your attention.
Dear Denis, thank you for your presentation, and I think the nuclear disaster show us the biggest impact to our environment, and when we assess the consequences of nuclear war, I think it is the same, even worse. So, thank you. I hope you will stay with us to answer to some questions from the audience. If you have some questions right now to Mr. Denis Bogush, I will ask you to raise the questions right now because he needs to leave in half an hour. Or send him on the chat some questions. While we are start to sharing Ms. Berdina Pampuriak presentation, Anya, yeah, I will Berzina. So I will try to introduce Svetlana and Svetlana to their presentation. Svetlana Pampuriak, we are asking you to take a floor. And Svetlana Berzina. Okay, so Svetlana Berzina,
Actually,
she's the
don't see
president of.
Do you
Huh?
see? I don't see Svetlana in chat. The other Svetlana, which is Berzina, I don't see now here in chat. Do you see? Yeah. Is she
Probably
present
not.
now? Probably not, because so I'm alone now. She probably busy, so that's why probably I will be alone. But so sorry for interrupting.
Oh, don't worry. Anyway, we hope that she can join later on. So Svetlana Perminova, that you can see her on the screen, she is environmental expert, director of the Center for Environmental Certification and Certification of Living Planet NGO. All Ukraine NGO was created in 2002, is a leading environmental organization, a member of many international associations and platforms, a partner of UNEP, the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine, and the State Environmental Academy of Ukraine. And also her partner in presentation should be mentioned here, Mrs. Svetlana Berzina. She is the president of the All Ukraine NGO Living Planet, head of the Public Council of the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine, and a member of the Operational Eco Staff, which was formed by the government bodies since the beginning of the war with the Russian Federation. She also worked as a member of the working group of the development of the recovery plan for Ukraine. And now I want to ask Ms. Svetlana Perminova to start her presentation. We are starting to sharing the screen. And don't forget, please, to tell to Anya that she needs to change the slides.
Yes,
Because unfortunately, we didn't change slides for Mr. Bogush.
So now is the first. Can I start? Is the first slide, and my colleague Svetlana, which is the president, and she is absent now. So here she's in the left corner, and I'm in this presentation. I'm just ecologist, and I'm an engineer ecologist. Is I think is enough for me. So I'm Svetlana Pervinova, to prevent misunderstood. So let us start. Please, the next slide. The second slide, please. So this slide, on this slide, you see a screenshot from the website of the organization that calls Operational Headquarters. It's an organization which was mentioned as that Svetlana Berzina is a member of this organization. In Ukrainian, this organization name called Оперативний штаб, because this word was це слово було для мене дуже, не дуже я його знала. Тобто operational headquarters in Ukrainian, це для нас у презентації оперативний штаб. So let us so this is a page of this operational headquarters, and on this you will see on the screen the main task for this organization is forming a list of violations in the field of environmental protection and bringing Russia to justice. So you also see a QR code on which you can move and to see more about this organization. And my speech will be mostly about the practical aspects of this organization, this operational headquarters activities. It's evident that Russia's military aggression should be considered not only at the political level, yes, but also an economic and the human rights level, and mainly for us, from ecologists, from the point of view of damage to the environment. So considering the deep connection between the environment and the civilian population health, it's absolutely necessary to consider the damage as war as a crimes, and the crimes for which Russia must and will answer in international courts. And to make it possible, it was the main purpose of this operational headquarters. So it's created for evaluate, collecting data related with environment, environmental pollution, improving different methodological control methods and methods of calculating environmental damages. So in soil, land, air, and etc. So the next slide is about umbrella organization, because this headquarters starts. So this headquarter organizations, it's functioning as, I hear my voice as a multiplying, or somebody should switch off microphone from the participants, because my voice is multiplying. Now it's okay. It's
Yeah, I'm sorry,
Now
it was
it's-
my mistake. I tried to connect myself, so it's okay.
okay. So some words about headquarters. It's not a quite new organization, but it was established under the umbrella organization, which is such an organization is a State Environmental Protection Inspectorate, Державна екологічна інспекція. Всім добре відома, мабуть, українським учасникам. So State Environmental Inspectorate is an umbrella organizations under which this headquarters is functioning. So some key facts about State Environmental Inspectorate is main function of this inspectorate is implementation of state policy on state supervision, state control in the field of environmental protection, rational use, recovery, and so on and so on. So it's just with body with a controlling option, executive body with controlling option. So, and it's an umbrella organization for the operational headquarters. So let us move to the fourth slide, the next. The QR codes you can see is the website of organization which mentioned on the slide. And I ask you, organizer, please turn the next slide, slide number 4. We will see the slide with the activity. Hello, anybody hear me? Guys, the fourth slide?
Yes, we hear.
We can hear you very.
Okay. So the fourth slide is now. So on this slide, we see some members of the operational headquarters. Is Svetlana Berzina in the middle of this picture? Yes, you see Svetlana Berzina. Okay, Svetlana, you see now on the slide, you see five guys, and a lady in the center is my colleague Svetlana Berzina, which should be present these presentations, and she is also mentioned as an operation and headquarter member. So she's in the center of this photo, and also on the slide you can see some briefly information about results of activity of such a headquarters, which is given as for October. I don't see now at top of the slide, but I think it was data was presented as of December 31 of the past year. So the key figures you see is that it was registered more than 1,000 accidents, and they were recorded in the so-called Unified Losses Register. It's so-called book on which all the accidents and violations register. And around 300 working trips were made. More than 2,000 soil and water samples were taken by these members. And also they provide methodologies methodologies to evaluate damages. And according to their methodologies, is up to now we see numbers as numbers of damages caused to the environment, about 1.5 trillion Ukrainian hryvnias, and you see this number in euro. It's more than, it's around 40 billion euros. So it's crucial to understand how huge this. And the next slide is just a picture. If I remember, the next slide is a picture of some factory, broken factory. Unfortunately, it's our reality, and now we see all such factories every day. So you can see a variety of such a photo in the media, and I think it's some factory which producing building materials. So it's just for, let us move to the next slide. The next slide, slides, 8 or 9 slides, they are it will be just a statistic info about threats and damages in numbers and facts. I will not go in detail because first speaker Sergei Vanyuta touched this issue in his presentation. So I propose the next 8 slides to look briefly. I will only note key facts probably. And the numbers on these slides, of course, are very impressive. So let us take a look. So this greenhouse emissions, I see now, as I see now on my screen, I see a slide about the greenhouse emissions. The next slide, number 10. The next slide about the nuclear power plant. It's about the pesticides pollutions and forest damages. The next, so we can just take it. And this is about the national parks. And as you see in the right corner, more than 10 national parks and national reserves, biosphere, are under occupation. So it's huge numbers, I think, because sometimes hectares and emissions in tons, it's not a very impressive information because we cannot imagine how it, but then national parks, which it's a huge. And the next slide, biodiversity, it's a huge situation. The next slide is about water resources, more than 50. It was a data made as of October, so now it's much more. These numbers are much higher. And let us move to the next slides and to go back to the activity of operational headquarters. Slide number 16 should represent us activities of operational headquarters. So, and this is methodologies. When you measure something or collecting information about damages is not enough, because you can do something with this, and you also need to provide this measuring and this evaluations of damages according to some methodologies. So there were no such methodologies. We can only measure something according to national standard or international if they were adopted in Ukraine. But there were no methodologies on how to measure ecological damage. I mean, in money, in their money equivalent. So such methodologies was also developed by these operational headquarters. 3 of them on this slide are developed, ready-made, and adopted by the Ministry of Environment. It's about air, land, and water. The name of these methodologies you can see on the slide, but the main idea is they are touch the environmental components, air, land, and water. So they are ready. They are ready now. And on the next slide, you will see, please, the next methodologies. They are still under development, and they are touching such environmental component as azote and Black Sea waters. Also, make available determination of damage caused by the national environmental within the territorial sea. Also under development methodology about determination of damage losses caused to the territories and bodies. When I start to reading, it's quite complicated to read. So, and the forest and also the mineral resources, which are subsoil. So these methodologies are still under development, and then they are also will approved by Ministry of Environmental. Let me just, before we go to the next slide, let me just to think if I not forget something on this issue. Probably, I think we could move further. Let us go to the slide number 18. And this is a challenge. It's good represented on the slide. What to be accepted when we measure something, when we collect information, it's okay, but to be accepted in international course, I was mentioned that it's the main idea of collecting informations to that Russia can represent in international courts and answer for its crimes. So to be accepted in international courts, we need to provide information of established quality. So, for example, indicators taken for damage calculations and sampling programs. Програми відбору проб мається на увазі. Sampling programs, selected test methods, оці всі методики, за якими ми відбираємо проби, and labs, laboratories should comply with international standard. Because if we bring to international community our labs tests made on ancient equipment, it was not comply with the requirement of this course. So now we need to provide the situation when our test methods and labs will be comply with international standards. More than 100 international standards now they are active in EU and more than 100 countries, other countries that are about method of test soils, water, air pollution. But in Ukraine, there are some of them are accepted as a national standards called DS2, and the rest still need to be accepted. So it's a part of work. It's a part of
Dear
part of work.
Svetlana, I'm sorry, gentle reminder about the time of your presentation,
Okay.
so you can short a
So
little bit.
timing is our big challenge every time. So I will now I will briefly say, go to the next slide. So this is a part of the problem that our standardization scope and our labs that should be go in compliance with the international. And this is international. This is interesting tool. It's a practical thing. It should be interesting. This is I know that my colleagues from Ukraine probably know this mobile application is so-called Ecozagroza. In English is an Eco3. So it's a mobile application available in as well as in English and in Ukrainian. Its main feature is that everyone can share and get information about air, water, soil pollution, and other environmental data in real time. For example, if Telegram channels scare you with radiation pollution, you just take in information. So you can install it and see how it works. You can find an information about soil pollution, and also you can register it and provide information to the system in a real-time manner. So it's very useful for us, and it's very funny, I think. So the next is, I think I even will not stop on this because it's understandable things about that we are moving according to European Green Deal course, and it's more, it's a common words. I think they are will announce during these presentations today a lot of times after. So I will not stop on this. And I think the last slide is you are know well about Ukraine recovery conference in Lugana. It's you can see information about this conference, and this was a crucial contribution to the future restoration of Ukraine. So you can see a QR code and read more about this conference. It was very, very, very useful, and more than 100 experts work on this conference from under the section environmental safety of Ukraine, and 76 nature projects, nature protection projects were adopted for implementations, for which project planned to be given more than 25 billion euros. So it's was a useful conference. So that's probably all to me.
Dear Svetlana, thank you. It's a very informative presentation, and I think all our international community will be, I don't know how to say it's impressed, probably it's not even a good word to reflect all this damage that happened in Ukraine, because it's behind all those numbers, people life and life of our animals, trees, and other our biosphere. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to ask Ms. Katerina Pampuryak to be ready for the presentation, and while she will do a speech. I want to introduce her. She is a CEO of Green Post, which main goal is to promote in Ukraine the ideas of explanatory journalism, investigative journalism in the field of protecting of environment and human life. Also, she is the head of the NGO Office of Independent Ecologists. She studied master's degree in political science at Taras Shevchenko Kyiv National University. She works on the problems of ecology, medicine, energy, and the agricultural sector, promoting in Ukraine the ideas of explanatory journalism and investigative journalism in the field of protecting the environment and human life. So, Katerina, I would like you to take the floor.
Thank you, Natalia. I'm delighted today to welcome everyone who gathered here to discuss an extremely challenging and important topic. We are now living in the world where the issue of security has acquired a completely different sense. The war in the center of Europe has shown that the world tools and actions that have prevailed for many years in civilized world are unfortunately inefficient these days. This is a war that the whole world feels, and the consequences of the war will probably affect the entire planet, because we are a single integral organism. The war is not located when it comes to the environment, which has no border. The thrust is that the whole world understands it, and the only country that completely ignores this is the aggressor, Russia. The war has already led to abnormal losses. Russia has fired about 5,000 missiles at Ukraine since February 24, 2022. Hundreds of thousands of human casualties, entire cities, villages, schools, hospitals, farms, fields, agricultural lands, forests, water bodies are contaminated with explosives. Flora and fauna are destroyed. Air emission caused by Russia's military aggression on the territory of Ukraine are transported, deposited, and have an impact on the territory of other countries, sometimes at a distance of thousands of kilometers. Thus, while we have already learned how to restore the energy infrastructure, rebuild roads, but restore people's lives and the destroyed environment, no one will return them to us. The environment needs to be restored and cared for now at the national and global level. This war has forced us to choose and prioritize, choosing between human life and natural and material goods. We always try to save life because it's the highest value for us. But after the victory, we can wake up in a country where there is peace, there are people, and there are no conditions for safe living. What matters the most is clean air, water, and soil. The rest can be restored and recreated. According to the latest estimates, it may take more than 10 years to restore the environment. I would like to dedicate my speech more close to the topic of hazardous waste, dangerous waste, as one of the most important components of environmental safety. Hazardous waste has such physical, chemical, biological, or other dangerous properties that create or may create a significant danger to the environment and human health, and that requires special methods or means of handling. Taking into consideration that environmental safety has already been discussed, I would like to emphasize one more time that its safety is an extremely important criterion for the stable existence and development of the state. Human activities and technological progress lead to negative consequences for the environment. Therefore, it accelerates the process of climate change on the whole planet. One of these consequential factors is hazardous waste, which can lead to the environmental catastrophe in the center of Europe. And this is a problem that may not wait for the end of the war, and it needs to be solved now. Primarily, the resources that we need are polluted daily with hazardous waste from artillery explosions, toxic substances, chemical and waste from the destruction of industrial facilities containing other dangerous substances. What the war doesn't destroy to the ground, it turns into destructive waste, war waste, which may contain a hazardous waste that needs to be properly managed now. As a result, the war has stopped many sectors of economy and plunged the country into an economic crisis. But this has not reduced the amount of waste. On the contrary, it's accumulating without proper control and management, which can lead to environmental, air, water, and soil pollution. To prevent the threat of environmental pollution by dangerous waste during the war, it's necessary to take measures to ensure the safety of industrial facilities, in particular those that generated this dangerous waste and those that ensure its management. Last year, Ukraine adopted the basic law on waste, which is due to enter into force this summer. This law established the legal framework for waste management in Ukraine and defines the right and obligation of waste management entities. But unfortunately, it's not be able to solve the problem here and now, especially in such a critical situation as we have now is war and economic crisis. We all are well aware that this is also the biggest threat of global security. In fact, all the objects and areas are now part of critical infrastructure of Ukraine, exist for the normal functioning of the state and citizens, and no one of them is aimed at protecting directly to the environment. But if we don't take care of it now, people will suffer from polluted air, poor water quality, and land unsustainable for sowing, and all this will have a significant negative impact on the nation's health on the national level. That's why we should already pay attention to new standards of environmental protection in the area of active hostilities and on the occupied territories, as well as pay more attention to the rehabilitation of war damaged areas. As I have indicated, hazardous waste management is always about the responsibility of two parties. Companies that provide this service and enterprises that generate this waste. The companies operating in this field in Ukraine are mostly private. They are businesses, they make money, pay taxes, and do an essential job for us, yes. Even in peace time, this business process is not easy. But during the war in combat zone and on occupied territories, it became almost impossible, primarily due to, firstly, to logistics. And here we need to the participation and support of the state. In fact, the laws of war and survival apply to the territories and preservation of the environmental resources in hardly out of the question, yes. In addition to the fact that there is no access to these territories due to security and logistic issues, there is also no economic opportunity to provide it. However, people continue to live there, hospitals continue to function under fire, and waste is generated, which no one deals with since it's not defined as a priority by law, unfortunately. And there are important questions which require answers. Can this waste wait until the end of the war? Well, if we are talking about bags and bottles, probably yes. But however, clinical waste, waste from oil products, waste batteries, mercury, toxic waste, pesticides, and agrochemicals can be neglected any longer. I would like to bring your attention to the fact that these wastes are critical in terms of safety. Therefore, it is necessary to ensure that these facilities are properly protected from war in the order of avoid environmental disasters and in case of damage, to ensure a quick response to reduce the impact on the environment. This can only be implemented when it becomes a matter of national importance on a high level. The first thing to do is to raise the awareness of facility safety for citizens and authorities at the state level. For our part, at Greenpost Media, we are engaged in providing information on this field to the public. Everything comes through public understanding, so until you realize the scale of this problem, you don't know that it exists. We inform, explain, and investigate because we do care about this. The slogan, the war will write everything off, slogan того, що війна все спише, will not work for us because the war will end and the planet will be unable to forgive us. Taking care of the environment is a contribution to a safe life for our future generation. We are living here, and now it's our responsibility to save our planet. The next step should be to attract the international community, NGOs, volunteers, and the public involvement in protecting the environment, monitoring the situation on the temporary occupied territories, as well as disseminating information regarding this issue. According to the preliminary data provided by the Ministry of Environment, the amount of approximate damage caused to the environment during the year of war has been calculated only for an automated system at more than $450 billion. It's ultimately terrified to imagine what the actual amount is, as only the damage from waste, for example, is estimated at more than $2 billion. it's worth nothing really that this amount don't include the consequences on the occupied territories and in the areas of active hostilities. We do realize that the economic crisis makes it impossible to properly dispose of waste in Ukraine, and it requires significant costs and that are not provided in the military budget now that we have. However, this is an issue of environmental safety and national health that needs to be funded as a critical infrastructure. One option is to attract investment in the waste management sector to support exciting businesses in this area, because after all, if these companies that we have now, for example, close down due to the economic crisis, or simply have their staff sent to the front lines, or even worse, they will not be able to operate as a result of shelling and missile attacks. After the war, we will have a country where life will not longer be safe. For instance, building a hazardous waste processing plant from scratch takes more than 2 years, provided that you have the funds and all necessary documents for it. To sum up, it's better to preserve the exciting ones and ensure the safety of their activities as much as possible into those conditions that we have in conditions of war. To support responsible waste management, the government should provide incentives for environmental activities and discourage illegal waste disposal, for example, by increasing fines and other sanctions, at least in the government control part of country, of course. So we can say only about this. At the last, I want to say that a safe Europe is impossible without an environmentally safe Ukraine, at least because of its our geopolitical position as the largest country in Europe. In this regard, environmental safety should become one of key issues of national security of Ukraine and Europe. So hazardous waste management facilities should be classified as critical infrastructure. I will continue. Moreover, there is a significant risk of dangerous waste impact on the environmental life and health of people across the continent. And of course, everyone must do everything possible to win, to choose life over death and freedom over slavery. We have a range of commitments to preserve our nature for the future peaceful life for future generations. And we must do so together, as solidarity is humanity, and this is our way to survive. So let's do it together. Thank you a lot for attention.
Thank you, Katerina. I agree with you that Russian, it's a post-Soviet expression that war can cover and hide everything does not really work, and it's a big light to the humanity and really lead us to the end of humanity on this planet, together with planet, I would say. I'm all. I always say that Ukraine is the first heavily developed industry country where war starts, and on the territory of Ukraine the war starts, and from the Second World War there wasn't any cases like us, and when war starts, nobody really understands what happened in reality and what consequences will be in the end. And all numbers that you mentioned, information of dangerous waste, what is right now we are faced to, I think it's even the smallest, and later on it will be the biggest consequences to everybody. So thank you very much for your presentation. Please everybody keep all your questions till our discussions. Now I want to invite to the floor Mr. Artemy Vorobyov. He is a counselor of Ecological company. He will present us new topic about environmental health in Ukraine and dangers of impacts of unaccountability. Mr. Vorobyov has 11 years of active legal practice. He began his legal career as an assistant judge at the commercial court, and then, having retired from the state service, specialized in economic, civil, and administrative litigation in Ukraine courts at all levels. Artemy possesses a remarkable experience of success in supporting claims and litigating in the highest courts of Ukraine, and currently leads the litigation practice at Ecological company, and Ecological company, as well as the Green Fund. It's our other partner who's supporting of this roundtable discussion that we are all listening today. So I hope you will enjoy his presentation, and we will start sharing the screen.
Greetings to all. Thank you for invitation for this event. I really appreciate it. Sorry for my English, it's not good enough, but I try to do my best so that my report will be interesting for you. Let me a little bit introduce me. My name is Artemy Vorobyov. I'm attorney at law firm Ukraine, and I represent Ecological company. Ecological company, some words about Ecological company. It's a boutique law firm which specializes only on class action lawsuits. We are first law firm in Ukraine which has positive, successful experience on class action lawsuit. Our practice was used by Supreme Court of Ukraine, who gives a green light for the possibility of class action in Ukraine. Generally, in Ukraine, we don't have special procedural provisions of legislations to the class action lawsuits, but we have some provisions of substantive law which makes the class action in Ukraine possible. Our team was first who proved it. Here, our team represents all Ukrainian NGO Green Fund, overcoming of humanitarian and ecological disasters. More about this NGO will be in my presentation. In Ukraine, I want to mention that in Ukraine, class action are possible only generally in two areas. It's consumer protection relations and environmental protection. Now our team works on a very big project concerning consequences of Russian aggression. It's a project called 24th of February, because we want to submit first in Ukrainian history class action to get the redress for all suffered Ukrainians. We think that every Ukrainian who has suffered during this aggression has a right to get the just satisfaction, the redress of his economical damage, moral damage, pecuniary damage, injuries, and also environmental damage. And our team are interested in every environmental issues because it's a way to class action in Ukraine. I want to start from this slide. Today, I want to talk with you about environmental health. Generally, Ukrainian legislation in the issues of environmental health, it's very old-fashioned and Soviet style. And the health defines environmental health like sanitary and epidemiological safety of the population. In a nutshell, it's a condition that is safe for human life in which there are no harmful influences and which contribute to favorable human activity. In fact, the problem of environmental health has been neglected from obtaining the independence of Ukraine. As you know, unfortunately, environmental policy of our state was focused only on issuing the permits for use of national resources. The only governing body who was responsible for sanitary and epidemiological safety was State Sanitary and Epidemiological Service of Ukraine. It's SSES, which was abolished in 2017. All powers of SSES were split between three different governing agencies. First agency is the Ministry of Health of Ukraine. Second agency is the State Service of Ukraine on Labor. And the third agency is the State Service of Ukraine on Food Safety and Consumer Protection. But most of the powers of SSES have been transferred to last one. It's State Service of Ukraine on Food Safety and Consumer Protection. Let's switch to next slide. But none of these bodies which I listed before has any powers on environmental issues, because environmental policy and environmental powers belong to Ministry of Environmental Protection of Ukraine. It's ministry. It forms state policy on environmental issues, all environmental issues, and also State Environmental Inspectorate of Ukraine, SEI, which monitors compliance with the law. It's in fact an enforceable agency of law in environmental issues. As you can see on this slide, how these bodies work together. State Service on Food Safety and Consumer Protection and SEI, as you see, they don't have any interaction with each other, unfortunately. I want to switch to the next slide. Yes, thank you. As I said before, State Service of Ukraine on Food Safety and Consumer Protection de facto is the main authority in environmental health oversight and supervision. But imagine, this authority also has powers in veterinary medicine, phytosanitary, food safety, and consumer protection. Generally, it's two different areas which are not connected with environmental health. Environmental Enforcement Agency, SEI, don't authorize to inspect and monitor compliance with the law in environmental health issues. The issue of sanitary and epidemiological well-being lies in the intersection of the powers of these two bodies, and therefore is not adequately regulated. Unfortunately, also, the officers of these bodies has low qualification. Also, there are a lot of lack of legislation in this question, and unfortunately, Ukrainian legislation and current judgment, years, they are really friendly to the polluters. For example, the fine for violation of the environmental law, if you are a polluter and you don't want to be able to be inspected by the SEI, it's only around 700 hryvnias. It's equivalent to 18 euro. So only for example. Another question is the damage recovery. It's a very hard question due to, first of all, low qualification of the officers, limited legal funding of these governing agencies, and polluter-friendly legislation. Questions about historical pollution or contamination are not regulated or investigated in Ukraine at all. Next slide, please. Ministry of Environmental Protections keep failing to develop modern, accurate, and adequate tools and procedures for assessing the damage caused by various pollutants and individuals. That's why it is very common for regulatory authorities to be unable to make a realistic assessment of the damage caused. State Service of Ukraine on Food Safety and Consumer Protection officers has no legislation or no other regulation or equipment to assess the negative impact on people from environmental pollution. Similar situation exists with regard to the management of waste, pesticides, and agrochemicals. This was a brief overview of the environmental health issues in Ukraine. Next slide, please. Let's return to the NGO Green Fund. As you can see on this slide, this NGO operates for 6 years. This NGO was a pioneer on practical application of Aarhus Convention. It's a convention about access to the ecological information and justice on environmental issues. This NGO has branched in all Ukrainian regions, and as you see represented also in Brussels here. It's very important to mention that the team of NGO Green Fund were advisors of President Zelensky during his election campaign. In my opinion, it's one of the most influential environmental NGO in Ukraine. Next slide, please. This team of Green Fund made a substantial contribution to the first successful class actions in Ukraine. How you can see, it's only some of the achievement of this NGO. Its team helps to fight with the polluters, contribute to the environmental class actions, help to collect and secure evidences for lawsuits, and provide any help to citizens on obtaining environmental information. Next slide, please. Let's speak about Russian aggression and its consequences. As you know, Russians try to destroy everything they can. They violate all the possible provisions of international humanitarian law, including Geneva Conventions, which prohibit indiscriminate use of weapons to cause the damage to the environment. According to the Environmental Ministry report, estimate damage caused to the environment in Ukraine is more than 1 trillion of hryvnias. It's equivalent to $25 billion. Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine at 20th of March 2022 adopted a resolution number 326. This resolution determined main types of harm and damage caused by Russians. Also, this resolution gives an objective to the authorities to develop tools, methodology, procedures to assess these types of damage. For example, Envy ministers developed methodology to assess the damage caused to soils and air due to Russian aggression. As one of the previous speakers mentioned, also State Ecological Inspectorate established operational headquarters. And the main objective of this headquarters is to collect all possible and fix all possible evidences which can prove the environmental damage. But very important to mention that this resolution and any subordinary legislation which were adopted to enforce this resolution doesn't include such type of damage as environmental damage caused to the citizens. All calculated and assessed damage is calculated as the damage which must be recovered to the state, not to the citizens. Also, there are no provisions about environmental health. That's why any governing body don't know what to do, how to discover this issue, how to monitor it, how to fix it, and what document they must fill, and etc., etc. That's why during this war and after this war, no legal ground to investigate or assess about environmental health in Ukraine, unfortunately. Next slide, please. Yes, and the last one. I will finish my short report, but in summary, I want to say key conclusions. Environmental health issues have some legislation basis, but we need to modify, improve, and develop it. We need to obtain an objective snapshot from the state of environmental health in Ukraine. Also, and the main point, we need to develop and implement efficient tools based on the best practice applied in the EU member state, and also develop EU legislation about this question. Because as I know, for example, there are no unified approach to environmental health in all EU member states and generally in EU institutions. It's a question which must be discovered, and we want to participate in this discovery and to work together. We think that our experience and the team of NGO Green Fund is the best possible platform to consolidate it, because first of all, we want to get collective redress for all Ukrainian people. As I think, in my opinion, environmental damage and historical pollution generally, it's a very important question. Very important, because we don't know which consequences will be in 5 years due to environmental pollution and destroying of ecosystem. We don't know, but every people has the right to free use of natural resources for safety environmental to their life. That's why we want to participate in any project which will help to make draft of some subordinate law, make a draft of assessment of environment of damage caused to citizens due to destroying of environment. Also, we want to announce that soon we scheduled a big event dedicated to the problem of environmental issue and environmental damage caused to people, to the population, not to the states. I finished my report. Hope it was interesting. If you have any question, with pleasure, I will answer it.
Thank you, Artemi. It's interesting how differently we can assess what happens with our environment, and actually, it just always shows us that we can't all the time think about everything. So many people have different ideas, and it should be shared. And since this roundtable discussion was organized by NGOs, we are very care about the people and of course environment. It's a hard work of everybody, everyone, and organizations, and all those issues should be discussed through different levels: state, population, person. If person is me personally, I'm not. If I'm not really care about the environment, that means nobody care, because everything is starting from me. And if you have this rule,
Indeed.
it will be in the end really good results that will join our souls together how to protect each other and protect all our environment. So I would like to stop sharing the screen of Artemi and turn to our last speaker in this session, to Mr. Mykola Khudintsev. He is a board member of the NGO International Cybersecurity University. He is the head of the Science and Education Center and has PhD in energetics. So I hope he will introduce himself.
Yes.
In good.
Thank you very
And
much.
you start to share.
I would like to introduce me and my comment. Please, I try to share my presentation.
Yeah, yes, we can see your presentation.
Yes, you can see. So, once minute.
Now, you return it back.
And now?
Yes.
And now, yes, thank you
Can
very much. Thank you, thank you.
Can you make a full screen? Можете на весь екран зробити? То ми ваші нотатки також бачимо.
Добре.
Чудово, дякую.
Я перепрошую, в мене є певна проблема, тому що я не чую звука, коли я роблю повний екран. Тому, будь ласка, якщо можна, завантажте мою презентацію з вашого комп'ютера.
Yeah. So while we are starting to sharing your presentation, you can start your presentation and we will. And don't forget to tell us when we need to switch to other slides, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, I'm very glad to speak in front of you in such a difficult time, and I want to thank the organizers for the opportunity, and I would like all participants to receive answers to questions related to the subject of our joint discussion. I represent the International Cybersecurity University, a non-governmental organization. Our main goal is to create conditions for improving cybersecurity base in Ukraine with the help of organizational, scientific, representative, and technical measures. Starting from 2019, we have already concluded about 30 memorandums of interaction and cooperation with various state bodies and public organizations in the field of information security and cybersecurity. Held about 15 events in which more than 1,000 representatives of state bodies and institutions, civil society, business took part, and also we implemented about 20 different projects, consulting, expertise, audits of cybersecurity state, also organization of technical assistance. The International Cybersecurity University is a co-organizer of annual cybersecurity months at the national level, together with the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of Ukraine and other governmental and state organizations. Today we present our vision of modern challenges and threats to the environment and critical ecological infrastructure in cyberspace. Please, the next slide. The national ecosystem of critical environmental infrastructure consists of the following state institutions which are presented on the slide. The main are Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine and the State Environmental Inspectorate of Ukraine. If we talk about the field of information and cybersecurity, our main joint tasks with stakeholders is to ensure the stable and safe functioning of informational resources, systems, services, and applications of environmental critical infrastructure. Information and cybersecurity of such resources are closely related to ensuring environmental, radiation, fire, civil, food, transit safety, and maybe some others, which we have to take into account. It is also necessary to take into account the extreme conditions and challenges that we face and we will face in the next future. Please, the next slide. First of all, it is war and military operations of this one-fifth of the territory of our country, which is approximately 125,000 square kilometers, is now occupied by our enemies. Secondly, about 40% of the territory is dangerously polluted, more precisely mined, which creates a considerable burden not only on ecosystems. Thirdly, there are hard human losses. We don't talk about the losses on the battlefield here for obvious reasons, but a third of the population of Ukraine, and it's more than 14 million citizens, left the country escaping from the war. Fourthly, it is the colossal direct and indirect loss of material resources. The monetary estimate is from $130 billion of direct losses and more than $600 billion of indirect losses. Fifth, according to the assessment of the Computer Energy Response Team of CERT-UA, the number of cyber incidents and cyber attacks on Ukraine informational assets and resources, as well as the resources in the field of ecology, increased by almost 3 times in 2022. And only the sixth challenge, is positive. According to the plans made back in 2021, the digital transformation should be covered all 100% of government services until the end of this year. We make adjustments to these plans, but we don't abandon them. Please, the next. The following 2 slides contain a list of information assets, mainly registers and information and communication systems, that are either already functioning or should be created and implemented in the responsibility area of critical environmental infrastructure stakeholders. It should be considered that the normatively determined list of critical infrastructure objects of the environmental protection sector has not yet been finalized, but the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Natural Resources of Ukraine has been appointed responsible for compiling this list. The principal state bodies' powers in the critical infrastructure and the protection field are given to the State Service of Special Communications and Information Protection of Ukraine. But in fact, the work to protect critical infrastructure is already underway. Normative grounds, laws, or government decisions for these resources creation are also given on the slide. Let us note such essential systems as State Radioactive Waste Accounting System, State Register of Radioactive Waste, and State Cadastre of Radioactive Waste Storage Facilities, and the list of temporary storage sites for radioactive waste. The second is the State Environmental Monitoring System, also Single Environmental Platform Ecosystem and Ecological, as we listen, and the National Register of Emissions and Transfers of Pollutants. Please, the next slide. These assets have already been identified as significant by the state. Society, citizens, public opinion, and experts, and the state must also determine together, the first, what services in the field of environmental protection should the state provide, existing and new? The second, how these services should counter the challenges mentioned above and in a broader context, and threats, as well as reduce risks. And the third, qualitative and quantitative development and implement these two primary tasks. Please, the next. The few slides focus on risks and threats and the relationships between domain risks and information and cybersecurity risks, and an attempt to assess these relationships and their undefined trends. The conducted expert assessment allows us to focus on the types of risks with which, in our opinion, cyber risks and accordingly cyber threats are more closely related, namely the individual risks, social risks, as well as the risks related to the war. Please, the next. We note that the landscape of cyber threats in the ecological sphere doesn't differ significantly from the general landscape of cyber threats. So we propose to use the generally known classification of cyber threats, which you can see on this slide. Please, next. We tried to make assessment of the importance of mentioned categories and types of cyber threats for forming a threat profile for the critical environmental infrastructure sector, which is provided in the following studies. It should be noted that the formation of a risk profile and a threat profile are necessary elements of any security management. Please, next. The last slides don't contain a detailed assessment of all known types of threats, but practices show that for the current state of maturity of informational resources and assets in the environmental critical infrastructure, such detailing is not yet necessary. Please, the next. The recommendations for ensuring information and cybersecurity and cyber protection at critical or critical information infrastructure facilities are outlined in the adopted regulatory document, the order or the administration of the State Service of Special Communications and Information Protection from 2021, number 601. They applied to all sectors of critical infrastructure, but we are interested in those sectors that are directly or indirectly related to the sphere of environmental protection, the ecological sphere and sphere of the support. They are fuel and energy sector, life support systems, food industry, and others, and of course the sphere, the sector of environmental protection, which is the main for our development. Please next. Separate meaningful provisions of these recommendations are outlined in 3 following slides. Without dwelling on them in detail now, because we have no much time, we know that the methodological recommendations contains a step-by-step and evident algorithm for creating a cybersecurity profile or cyber protection profile at the organizational and technical level. The slides contain a list from 5 classes of cyber defense measures. The next slide, please. 4 levels of implementation of cyber protection profile. Please, the next slide. And also 7 stages of development and implementation of a cyber protection profile, road map plan for the creating of system of management system of informational security in ecological sphere or ecological sector of critical infrastructure. And now, finally, I could to make some conclusions. Please, the next slide. And the next, please. With conclusions, thank you. Finally, let me state the main conclusions of our message for you today. The first is that the risks and cyber risks in the ecological or environmental critical infrastructure can be described with the help of existing national legislation. And now we can use these regulatory acts. The main stage, the main stage of creating a security management system are making profiles of risks, profiles of threats, and profiles of cyber protection. And the third, the last conclusion is that the roadmap and methodological recommendations, existing methodological recommendations for the cyber defense profile development can be used in practice and everybody can use it. The next slide, please. And now, thank you for your attention and hope to see all of you in Ukraine, peaceful Ukraine, soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hudintsov, and for this very interesting presentation. We, of course, late, and I will ask our next session later on to try to keep timing for the presentation. So I'm opening the floor for the discussion and questions to our presenters. So, okay, so everybody, I think you want to ask about this very interesting topic that we raised today in our first session about the damage caused by Russian aggression to Ukraine, to our environmental life. I need to say, like, almost in every presentation we heard about economic assessment. I would say all this distraction. So I want to ask our speakers, what do you think? All these numbers, do they really can assess? Because like how we can renovate everything what was just distracted and destroyed? Is it easy to calculate about water, health, all environment, all this damage, about our ground that looks like a cheese, Swiss cheese right now? I'm not talking about people who actually died on the field. It's also very dangerous to everybody, starting from the ground and finishing via taking all this. What do you think? Who wants to answer to this question?
Maybe I try
Yeah.
to answer.
Yeah, tell me please.
I think we need to use and study foreign experience. For example, now I'm studying history of class action in Canada. Canada is a very progressive country about environmental class action. In the history of Canada, there were different class action concerning environmental pollution and historical pollution. And first of all, forensic experts in Canada, they can make, for example, assessment of the reducing of the price due to this pollution. They make a market model. They compare it with the most similar market model of the not polluted place, and to make the difference from the period. It's, for example, first question, how to evaluate it. Also, every person which rights were violated by this aggression has a right to get just satisfactions in the form of moral damage, according to the practice of European Court of Human Rights. For example, cases of Georgia versus Russia, Turkey, Cyprus versus Turkey, and European Courts of Human Rights said that collective redress is possible. The main problem is to prove that it was a violation of the right which is granted under the provisions of European Convention to Human Rights. And generally, the renovation and restoration of recovery of the ecosystem, it's a very complicated question. But we also need to study, for example, case of Iraq and Kuwait. When Iraq made an invasion to Kuwait and occupied some of its territory, it was a decision of Security Council of the United Nations, and the consequences after this aggression. They were regulated under decisions of Security Council. There were I don't remember quantity of this commission. There were 7 or 8 compensation commission, and the fourth commission was about environmental issues, because in 1990 Iraq destroyed a lot of oil storages at the territory of Kuwait, and it was a very big air pollution, soil pollution, even water pollution. And we need to study this experience and to mention it. We don't need to know to discover and try to create bicycle. We need to use all possible experience in history which exists. In fact, we need to start and study it. It's a very big amount of materials, of documents, of evidence. We need to study all of them and to discuss preliminary conclusions, to make the final conclusion, final recommendation, and to find the way where we need to go.
Thank you, Artemy. I think you just raised a good issue that this discussion is probably only the start point for the bigger work. And of course, we have only 4 hours for this meeting, and we can't cover everything and discuss in details everything what should be discussed. And time is a pressure, and we need to to start to create some plan for the recovery for Ukraine and all our Black Sea region too, because we will damage to everybody. I want to ask Svetlana Pomporyak. She is an ecologist with a long experience and working in the field. Did you try to assess how long it takes to recover of our land and the environment from all this damage? You have good numbers and statistics showing your presentation, but how long it takes actually to recover, even with current assessment what we have been using?
Unfortunately, I think it takes a long time, but and because the damages are real huge, and we need, of course, we need a variety of resources, intellectual, financial, and other. So in my
Like it's a
opinion, I think
decades.
the next half century we will live under the consequences of this, unfortunately. Even if we will systematize our activity, I think the half of the 10th century we will still find in the rest of these missiles, we will find in everything. And it was a really my unoptimistic prognosis is half of the century is minimum. And situation is really terrible. But of
So
course,
it's like
We
it's
can just take and repair it like with any spare parts or something else. Yeah.
yeah, it's like it's very optimistic, and I would say we want to believe in it when we work all together with all world support, because it's a huge
yes,
territory. It's the biggest country in Europe.
of course, we should be optimistic, and we should provide a systematic work together. And due to the support of our international colleagues, I think everything will be okay. Such a simple words, but I think everything will be okay because we are very positive, and I think we are should expect for a great job. But I think that maybe is a big it's a very big price. Our damaged environment, our damaged families, but I think it's a terrible price, but it's for our European future, which are expected to be great. So it's my positive vision of the situation.
Thank you, Svetlana. We have comment here from our participant local one.
I'm on the same page.
Can you take closer?
Examples and the most effective and fastest way to reach the targets and conquer to use the class action platform. It's copy paste. Unfortunately, we cannot work on each basis with individuals. You should create this scenario for a quantity of the people and multiple of this. And in this point you will get the results in a really fast track in the distant future, approximately until 5 years from the history basis. Of course, each cases are different, but in general, we can combine them in the groups and reach our targets much more faster than if we will do it by individuals. In each case, we will divide. We should combine. This is the idea. In environmental, we can evaluate, the average estimations for each regions, compare with population in this region, and divide it on different multiples. Use them like do financials do when they compare different companies in each sector. What we should do in environmental basis. It's comparable for all the quotes, which we just need to find these multiples. Thanks.
Thank you. It was Ivan Shakhovtsov, representative low company. So yes, time is precious, and we need to start already to prepare the plan and assess all cases and put and work together. And I hope we will have a big community of experts who will do this. So there is no question from our online audience. Please, Anya, can you check this chat if there is any questions? If
Check chat, no question.
so, no question from the chat. No, right? Nobody raised the hand this time. So, I want to announce break. 20 minutes. We will return 2:40 Brussels time and 3:40 Ukrainian time. So, thank you very much all speakers and panelists and all discussion. I hope you enjoy. We'll return us in 20 minutes. Thank you.
Поджентив 2.40. Просто.
Галущенко and Alexander Borsuk to join to the floor. So let me, while people are going back, I want to introduce our speakers. And they will talk about Chernobyl radiation, ecological biosphere during the invasion and problems of the post-occupation period. So Alexander Galuchenko is PhD of Geographical Science. He is a director of this reserve since 2019. He has extensive management experience. Several years he worked in the Department of Expertise and Analysis of the Development of Technogenic Environmental Nuclear Safety and Nature Management of the Secretariat of the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine from 2007 till 2011. He headed the National Agency for Environmental Investment of Ukraine since 2018. He is an expert from Ukraine on the program Committee Climate Environment Efficient Use of Resources and Raw Materials of the EU Framework Program for Research and Innovation Horizon 2020. So, if our speakers are ready, I would like to invite them to the floor.
Я могу начинать?
Yes, please.
I am glad to welcome all the participants of the event. We are very grateful to the organizers for the opportunity to present information about Chernobyl Reserve. Considering the importance of the topic of our discussion, my colleagues have prepared reports that will be relevant not only for our institution, but also for many protected areas in Ukraine that suffer from the consequences of military operation. I hope that the information of our speakers will be interesting for European colleagues and will be beginning of fruitful cooperation in the nearest future and after our victory. Let me introduce the first speaker, Alexander Borsuk, head of the Flora and Fauna Laboratory of the Chernobyl Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you.
Александр, вас не слышно.
Alexander, we actually seen your presentation. Do you have problem with screening and sharing? It was also on full screen, so it wasn't any problem. Can you try to speak and unmute yourself? Аня, пробуй Олександра Бурсука мікрофон включити саме. Включити? Включити. В нього включений мікрофон? So our system shows, пане Борисов, у нас система показує, що ваш мікрофон включений, але ми вас не чуємо взагалі.
А він нічого не каже. Ти що, не бачиш?
Я ж кажу, що у нього не працює система. У нього, можливо, якісь проблеми з мікрофоном, але або якесь оновлення блокує діяльність.
Hear me now?
Трошки прорізалися трошки.
It's
А попробуйте
just
ще поговорити.
some settings on the program, so it was.
Excellent. Yeah, we can hear you.
Russian aggression is made a big impact of environment and at all. It affected about 25% of the protected territories of Ukraine, despite the fact that this territory represents around 35% of biodiversity of the Europe. According to the scientists, there are 70,000 species of plants and animals, many of which are rare and endemic. Today, dozens of natural park reserves suffer from direct aggression and the consequences of military operations. Unique Ramsar sites of international importance are under the threat of destruction. There are millions of hectares of emerald network which carry out the mission of protecting and preserving biodiversity, now in the zone of damage. Dozens of objects of the Nature Reserve Fund of Ukraine remained under the occupation, and the consequences of this situation can be catastrophic for the environment. Chernobyl Radiation and Ecological Biosphere Reserve is one of the largest nature conservation objects in Ukraine. Was one of the first to experience all the horrors of the Russian invasion. For more than 1 month, from February 24 to April 1, the entire exclusion zone and the adjacent territory of the Kyiv Police were under occupation. Our reserve is quite young organization. It was established only in 2016. According to the decree of the President of Ukraine, it was established within the exclusion zone on the territory of Ivankin and Polisa district of the Kyiv region. 200 and almost 27,000 of hectares of land were included of the reserve territory. But it started working only in 2017, after the regulation of reserve was approved by the order of Ministry of Environment, and the reserve was registered as legal entity. Despite its short history, reserve was added to the world database of protected areas, registered as the publisher of biodiversity data in GBIF, with first dataset published, and in 2022, reserve received the status of the scientific institution. The main goals of our institution is preservation of the most typical natural complexes of Polisa in the natural state, ensures support and increase the barrier function of the Chernobyl exclusion zone, rehabilitation of the area contaminated of radionuclides, and stabilization of its hydrological regime. It has quite big biodiversity, around 1,400 species of flora and more than 300 species of fauna. Some of them are rare. 44 species of flora and 75 species of fauna are registered in the Red Book of Ukraine. 14 species of flora and 14 species of fauna in the EUCN Red List. And 5 species of flora and 16 species of fauna is in the European Red List. So the war made the threat to all ecological services, to ecosystem and the biodiversity of our biosphere reserve. During the occupation, all personnel of the reserve were evacuated, but we have lost of connection to some personnel on occupied territories of Kyiv region. Also, we have a lack of information about the state of the reserve and the actions of the occupiers. During the invasion, we have short ability to monitor the ecosystem state and mostly can use only remote methods and satellite data. During the occupation, we lost some equipment like computers, including the computers for GIS, freezers, some office equipment, drones, camera traps, microscope, and those. Also was damaged office building and some laboratory equipment like hematology analyzer and centrifuges and some other. But for now, restored basic functionality of the offices in the Chernobyl, and we were back to our work in May 2022. But occupation and war in our territory have ecological consequences. First of all, it's increase in number of big wildfires, illegal logging, damage for populations of rare species, disturbance of the soil, poaching of wildlife, and mice, and unexploded ordnance contamination, chemical contamination, pollution by household waste, remnants of military equipment, damage to ecosystem services. Wildfires in 2022 was quite a big problem. We have a lot of big wildfires. In this slide, you can see all of them. If you compare this fire season with last year, it's almost the same like was in 2020. But in 2022, we haven't the dire weather conditions. So it was due to the Russian invasion that we have such a big problem. We try to collect data on all ecological consequences on territory of our reserve. First of all, we made some wildfires mapping, and as you can see, we have quite a big area of our territory damaged by wildfires. It's around 31,000 hectares of forest and non-forest areas. During the occupation was damaged 14,074 hectares of territory, and after the liberation of the exclusion zone was damaged by fire 17,700 hectares of territory. A lot of in this slide we represent what kind of landscapes were damaged during the invasion and occupation. Mostly it was grasslands, and after the liberation of the territory, we have a lot of big forest wildfires. We have some burned swamps, also burned territories after 2022, 2015, some other lands. Sorry, there is some problems with slide change. But for now, there is still a need to verify some data on the wildfires, because these wildfires, especially forest wildfires during the summer period, deals great damage to the territory. Because as you see on this slide, we have some moderate and high severity wildfires, which conclude in dying of forest. It's violet and red color on this map. But we still need to make some research on field to verify these indices and make conclusion about the actual damage of this territory. The main reasons for such large wildfires in 2022 was first of all war reactions of February and March, arsons by Russian occupation forces, prevention of firefighting by occupiers, contamination of territory by unexploded ordnance and landmines, destroyed and stolen fire inventory and fire trucks. We should expect a further need for deminers during the wildfire firefighting, and to which the tendency of the occurrence of large fires will continue in the near future. Also, we have some smaller territory, more local impacts like illegal logging, disturbance of the soil, poaching of wildfire, chemical contaminations, pollution, etc. It's mostly situated near the roads on the territories where occupiers were living. Some trees were cut to make some trenches and so on. About the poaching wildlife is quite the issue because we can't say how much wildfires, how much deer, elks were shot by occupiers during the invasion because it's quite hard to find the evidence of this data. Damage population of rare species we also can identify on data we have collected during the last years. And in this map, we show some territories where some rare species are situated on the territory of our biosphere reserve. But in general, we have a lot of damage to ecosystem services because all the consequences lead to some problems with ecosystems. About the regulating services like radionuclide and carbon storage, water purification, erosion and flood control, climate regulation. Also, we damaged some supporting services like provisioning of habitat, soil formation, nutrient and water cycling, etc. But the biggest problem for next years will be landmines and unexploded ordnance contamination, because they spread on large territories, raises the danger to personnel, leads to lack of access to the territory, limit fire management and firefighting, limit habitat and forest management, can be source of fire ignition and animal deaths. Landmine and unexploded ordnance clearing is quite long and complicated processes, especially in forested areas. So we need to solve a lot of post-occupation problems, like restore lost and damaged equipment, inspect territory for UXO and landmines with mapping its contaminated lands. We need to territory demining with participation of international organization and with quite big funding of these operations. We need further investigation of ecological consequences of war with related research. We need capacity improvement of territory management and firefighting. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Alexander. It's, our Chernobyl territory is a very special area, which was firstly attacked from Russian aggression, and secondly was deoccupied with Russians, and it's really unique territory of biosphere area, whereas animals growing, you can find somebody who is you can't find in other forests in Ukraine, and how nature can win, whereas no people, I would say. I want to be friends with them, but honestly, they're better living separately. So thank you for your presentation. We are keeping in mind all questions to you. And I will ask you, please send me your presentation too for sharing later on with our colleagues. And I want to ask to be prepared Mr. Valery Malarenko. He is also specialist of this reserve. He will talk about the European research infrastructure, the entry of protected areas as a tool of international scientific cooperation. So he is an official of the International Cooperation Department of the Chernobyl Radiation Ecological Biosphere Reserve. He is working on the initiative of the Chernobyl Reserve to create a Ukrainian research infrastructure of the objects of the Nature Reserve Fund of Ukraine, with its further integration into the European research space Also, he is chief editor of a scientific and practical magazine, Chernobyl Science Hub. So, Mr. Malarenko, we are ready to listen to your, I'm sure, very interesting presentation.
Thank you. I am ready. Somebody see my presentation?
Yes, we can see very good, and we can hear you also very good.
So I can start.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. My greetings for all the participations. The topic more of my presentation, it's new opportunities for Ukrainian protected areas in international scientific cooperation, like European research infrastructures. First, the situation in Ukraine with science is not good. Today, we have a significant imbalance between the level of development of science and our economy. As a result, there are unsatisfactory material and technical base of scientific research and significant lack of funding for science. One of the ways to solve this problem we see in the unification of various scientific organizations and research infrastructures for optimal use of resources, personnel, materials, equipment, computing resources, storage, data, and knowledge banks. What are research infrastructures? Determination, research infrastructures, it really means facilities, resources, and related services that are used by scientific communities to conduct top-level research in these respective fields. It covers much of scientific equipment or sets of instruments, knowledge-based resources such as collections, archives, or structures for scientists' information, enable information communication technology-based infrastructure such as grid computing, software and communication, or any other entity of unique nature essential to achieve excellence in research. Such infrastructures may be single-sited or distributed or organized network of resources. Couple words of main direction of scientific activities, institution of National Reserve Fund of Ukraine, which includes, of course, Chernobyl Reserve. These are implementation of fundamental and applied scientific research on the functioning of ecosystems and condition to protecting regimes. It usually includes organization, implementation, systematic observation of the state and dynamics of natural complexes and objects, ecosystems, and climate. Inventory of objects of flora and fauna, plant communities, natural environments, settlements, and landscape diversity. Development of scientific recommendation, programs, action plans regarding the preservation and reduction of rare and endangered plant and animal species. So, as the initiative of Chernobyl Reserve was created a national consortium of research infrastructure object of National Reserve Fund of Ukraine. Today, it includes several natural reserves and Policia National University. One of the main tasks of the newly created organization is integration into the European research area. For this goal, we have a legitimate reason for such integration because Articles 374, 377 of the Association Agreement between Ukraine and the European Union member states stipulate that cooperation between the parties is aimed to promote the involvement of Ukraine in the European research area. European Union development of common research infrastructure is recognized as one of the strategic priorities of state policy, for which European Commission and each European country separately allocate significant amount of funding. The most promising financial instruments for Ukrainian research infrastructures are programs of the European Union, Horizon Europe, and LIFE. This program can be a really good financial tools for Ukraine integration into the European research area. In the context of the current situation in Ukraine, the program Horizon Europe introduced special initiative. For project financed under the program, there are publication on the portal of funding and tenders with opportunities for research and other specialists from Ukraine. On the slide, you can see a special button, Horizon for Ukraine. This is the name of this initiative. The most promising for Ukrainian scientists is participation in the European Consortium of Research Infrastructures, ERIC. Such a consortium has a large number of advantages and benefits. European Consortium of Research Infrastructures is form of association of research infrastructures and enjoys customs and tax preferences and import and export of goods and services with the rights of international scientific organization. It's a big advantage. For Ukrainian scientists, advantages for joining existing European research infrastructure consortiums, its ability to have access to modern scientific equipment, to receive scientific data using such equipment, wide range of opportunities for academic mobility and research internship, opportunity for Ukrainian researchers, including young scientists, to join the leading studies of single research space, openness of access, the scientific assets of the countries, the single research space. On this slide exposes imagine how we can reach the success participating in the process integration to European research areas. First step is development of regulation, action plan, produce decision, creating a working groups. Second step is creation of database of experts, donors, partners, project proposals. It's monitoring schemes. Next step is consultation on request, standards, self-assessment criteria, and harmonization with European regulations. Sorry, it's don't translate, but it's dissemination of proposal for cooperation, financial partnership. Next step is creation working groups, decision about partners, participation in tenders. Next step, analysis of results in case of victory, involvement employees. Next step, monitoring report, and a winning step, constant international support and development, the research infrastructure. Thank you for attention.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm sure this plan could be realized in a very good way, and I really like all this approach when you can see clearly the whole picture with all steps and all connections.
We hope so.
We sure Ukrainian experts are very good. The problem is how to connect Ukrainian experts with broader community in Europe and the United States. And I need to say, I'm working on international field for a long time, and I know many excellent experts in my field in nuclear security, but maybe 20% of them literally speak fluently English and using English as a tool for their work. And other 80% of excellent experts are not really English communicated. So I think we need to establish some language professional lessons for everybody, just to take everybody to the audience. I would like to ask our last speaker, Alona Varuha. She is a scientist of this reserve. Why I can hear myself twice? Strange. Okay.
Hello, good afternoon.
Alana, yeah. Alana, we can see you very good, and we can hear you very good.
Great, super, thank you. So
Probably
today
I will
I
stop and
want.
check my sound. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So today I would like to talk to you to tell you about management of protected areas according to European standards and how to implement it in Ukraine, especially to stress on the need for a pilot project for a practice implementation. Protected areas and the importance of their management. Actually, protected areas are one of the key tools in nature conservation. They are crucial for maintaining species and habitat diversity as well as protecting landscapes. A global study finds that protected areas don't always benefit wildlife. It is because low management. Actually, we can just expect protected areas to work without appropriate management. For example, EU Biodiversity Strategy for 2030 identifies 3 major targets where protected areas are central. One of them is the need to improve management effectiveness in all protected areas. This strategy commits to effectively manage all protected areas, defining clear conservation objectives and measure and monitoring them appropriately by 2030. So how about management in Ukraine? I'd say it's on the way to improvement. For example, recently was adopted the law of Ukraine on the basic principles of the state environmental policy of Ukraine for the period until 2030 and the National Action Plan for Environment Protection until 2025. Last one in particular contains the following planned measures: its creation and implementation of system evaluating the effectiveness of management of Nature Reserve Fund of Ukraine, it's reforming the activity of State Security Service that make their duties within the Nature Reserve Fund according to European model, also strengthening the system of state management of the Nature Reserve Fund, for example, creation of special state management body, so-called state agency. Now the law is under development to create the agency. Restoration and creation of new system or targeted financial of environmental protection measures in the Nature Reserve Fund in Ukraine, and develop and implementation of action plans for preservation and reproduction of certain types of flora and fauna and their habitats within Nature Reserve Fund. It is going and discussing the changes to the law on Nature Reserve Fund. Thus, Ukraine continues to move closer to European norms of management of protected areas at legislative level. But what about practice? Is it really on the way to improvement? As for now, the analytical report supplementing the conclusions of the European Commission regarding Ukraine's application to join the European Union says about the basic level in achieving the European Green Deal regarding the environment and climate change. To fix this, it is important to implement it correctly. You cannot skip parts of the directives and come up with your own approaches if this issue in the EU is defined by regulations. So it is important to remember about the need of practical implementation, not just legislative approximation. Thus, now in Ukraine, practice is far behind even the legislation. I'd say it's a long way to improvement. As one of the concept and therefore the practice of protected area management in Ukraine and in the European Union differ substantially. Even if we forget about the difference in approaches and measure only protected areas management efficiency, we could say that average management efficiency of some Ukrainian, for example, national parks in the Carpathian region is 53%, while, for example, German protected areas has more than 80% efficiency. With the approximation of Ukrainian legislation and the adoption of European concept of protected area management, we still need to understand how to implement EU approaches to nature protection within the protected areas in practice. And first step in this direction can be a pilot project on the selection of the protected area, which will go through the process of adapting its management to EU requirements. So what about Chernobyl reserve management? Management effectiveness of the Chernobyl reserve was assessed using the worldwide applicable method, Management Effectiveness Tracking Tool, or most known as MET4, in December 2021, 2 months before the full-scale invasion. Back then, reserve overall management effectiveness was ranked 57%. It was a decent result considering the factors of the reserve use and ongoing formation period, COVID pandemic, the poor state of funding, a lack of employees, and etc. Despite the occupation of the territory of the reserve by Russia and unprecedented negative impacts, the 2022 evaluation showed almost 55% of management efficiency in the reserve, demonstrating reserve's outstanding perseverance. Though invaders did jeopardize all today management activities, conservation measures, and research projects in the reserve. So, considering reserve fast development and resilience, it could be a pioneer, I think, in the implementation of European approaches and experience in the protected area management. Why can the reserve be a pioneer in the implementation of European standards? First of all, it's because reserve's ability to fast development and potential for capacity building. During only 6 years since its establishment, despite the corona crisis and war, reserve was able to develop and approve lead management and territory organization projects. It's like 2 management plans of the territory. It also put itself on world's protected areas map, become a biodiversity data publishing on global biodiversity information facility, gain a rank of scientific institution according to Ukrainian norms. And participate in international research projects and many others. Second of all, it's the end of basic formation period within the reserve. It could be seen as an opportunity to build further development, incorporating now EU approaches and practices, not existing ones in Ukraine, which needs changes anyway in accordance with EU norms. And third of all, it's post-occupation territory. So for now, 20% of Ukraine's national parks were still occupied. And we need to know how to deal with such territories in future. What protected area management strategy work best for such territories? And the reserve could be a place where such strategies could be discovered and tested, and then the results could be disseminated to other areas, similar territories, and implemented on practice according to European standards. Thank you very much for your attention and for your time.
Thank you. Yeah. Why is Haho here? It was all good before. Everything is closed.
Настя, у меня ничего не... Зачем ты?
Я думаю, может, там те самые.
У меня даже не подключен.
Okay, so thank you for your presentation to all our panelists, and I would like to open the floor for the discussion. And I hope all those presentations will find the feedback from different institutions, because good scientific approach and research, it's a basis for the creation of important steps in environmental protection. Is there, Anya, can you check please if there is any questions from the chat?
No.
No.
No questions, no. Only compliments.
We have only compliments in the chat from our participants that they like our roundtable discussion. But I also want to add to our discussion Mr. Andrei Yanushevsky. He is representative of the European Commission and participate today in our meeting to say about Euro integration of Ukraine. Yes, so about the steps that our country is supposed to take to be a part of the European Union from ecological perspective. And we actually have a very interesting discussion during our break, and I hope we will together join and share these thoughts with our audience. Please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, and thank you for organizing this very interesting event. I'm really impressed by the quality of the presentations and quality of expertise that we heard from the NGOs in Ukraine. I think this is a great asset of the country, that it has so committed people and knowledgeable people who want to make a change on environmental field. Now in Europe, environment was neglected for a long time. The oldest piece of legislation on environment comes quite late, in the late 70s, on birds and habitats, then directives on nature protection. And since then, we have developed a really vast legislation on environment. We have now more than 200 pieces of legislation related to environment. And on the way to join the European Union, I'm really pleased that Ukraine was granted this perspective in June officially. You would have to take on board all the legislation there. But the question is, I think, what some speakers already pointed to. The last speaker was mentioning it, and also Ms. Pampuriak, speaking about waste management, was mentioning this, that it's not enough to have all the laws adopted, which would transpose, in a way, the EU acquis on environment into the national law. But the question is of how to enforce these laws and how to implement these laws. And for this, you need to be also prepared on the day one when you join the European Union, not only to have the legislation in place, but also to implement it. And that requires strengthening the institutions, capacity building of the institutions, which overlook the implementation of legislation. So you have to build the rule of law, let's say, inside very strong. And this is also a task, I think, for NGOs to raise awareness about this and to press the government to give sufficient resources also to do that. Because in the end, let's take the waste management example. It all drips down to communities. These are communities, municipalities who will have to deal with this, and they have to have sufficient means to do that. The framework, the law framework, is very important. It's the key, it's the basis, but then they have to have also, as put it very bluntly, money to do that. So they need to have income either from governmental sources, from eco funds, and also from citizens who pay for eco services, who pay for waste collection, who pay for water, etc. So to set up this whole system, it's not an easy task. It needs a careful planning, I think. In the European Union, we are here to assist the countries who are on the way to the European Union to do this. And you have quite a lot of opportunities to first learn about the EU legislation, to get access to some programs, like recently Ukraine joined LIFE program, which enables you to bid for projects on nature protection, climate change, and circular economy. And there will be also other possibilities, funds for preparing the country to join the European Union. There are regional programs, there are pilot projects, technical assistance. So all of this is at your disposal. The main issue is to make your decision makers as well aware that environment is not something separate from the European track and not separate from economy, that actually environmental issues are part of the solution on how to transform your economy into modern, sustainable economy, how to make this, we call it green transformation. And as the last word, I think that it's worthwhile to think when the Russian aggression is over, when the war is over, we have Ukraine back again to rebuild the country. It was said that from all these damages, we need to rebuild the country. So the question is how to provide that this recovery, this rebuilding of the country is made according to best available environmental standards, because I think that there will be a great, let's say, eagerness to make some shortcuts, to build back not better, but quicker, cheaper, so to show instant results. But I think it's not the right way forward. Then to mend something that was not done properly from the beginning takes more time and costs than do something from the beginning according to the rules. So environment plays a crucial role here. Environmental impact assessments are very important when you do investments, for instance, and all the environmental legislation needs to be integrated into development strategies, energy strategies, agriculture strategies, all of these other sectors which have an impact on environment. So thank you very much for this interesting discussion indeed, and I hope you need to continue helping the Ukrainian society to prepare your country for accession in the EU. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrzej. Yes, it's very important because we are so interconnected and related to each other that all systems can't exist without each other. It just tells us about legislation is good, but how we are using this legislation later on, how we are realizing this legislation, it's other important question. And I have a question to Mr. Malarenko because I really like his circle of steps of his proposal. And I remember first step, it was laws and regulation. And I'm kind of confused because like laws and and regulations will be created by people and experts. So why you have experts at 4 steps, not on the collecting people on the first step? Using civil society as good expertise and people who care about the environment. Mr. Malarenko, what you would say with your program?
Sorry, could you repeat, please, your question?
You on your presentation, the last slide you have there is circles with steps how to realize your program that you propose about research, combining Ukrainian research with European community and other experts in the field. And you and Rosa, as a first step, it's creation laws legislation. And on the first step, you just going to collect experts and people in the field. So why you put people in the first step and why you put regulation on the first step?
Because
Why it should, but
sorry.
I mean, like a regulation is writing by people, and it will be good to invite NGOs, somebody who care about this topic, to be from the beginning to create in the right way, as Andrzej says.
But the first step regulation, because we need the state support for this process. Because creation of research infrastructure is a very, very expensive process. There needs a lot of funds for. So now Ministry of Science of Ukraine working for special legislation for support program for support research infrastructures in Ukraine. It must be nearest time approved by Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine. So we can discuss which step we need to stay on the first, but I think
Пане Маляренко, дозвольте, я українською скажу, можливо, просто ви не зрозуміли, що я маю на увазі. Ви просто поставили на перший крок, створення законів, а людей поставили на четвертий крок, там, де всі експерти, ваше суспільство, НГО, де законотворці сидять насправді. Я маю на увазі, чого ви однодумців не шукаєте, не ставите людей, не об'єднані навколо себе на першому місці, а потім вони вам підтягують закони, все інше. Ви розумієте, що ви якось навпаки зробили?
Я б не розглядав би так суворо саме цю схемку, яку ми представили як наше бачення. Справа в тому, що там нема такого строгого порядку. Це щось на зразок дорожньої карти, якої ми намагаємося.
Я ж кажу, чому ви собі уявляєте дорожню карту шляхом? Але тоді відповідайте англійською, бо у нас аудиторія англомовна.
Sorry, this our diagrams, which was introduced on the last slide, I try to show the roadmap for the process of integration national Ukrainian research infrastructure to European research area. It's not strong order, these steps. We can mix them any order. So I don't see here some problems.
Well, no, it's not a problem. I just was curious why you choose this approach.
May I add a little remark?
Yes, please.
On my personal, my humble opinion, if we will wait some presence, so-called from our state or from any governing agency, what I mean with presence, good legislation is implementing of international experience, implementing of UA directives, etc., etc. we can wait for 5-10 years for it. Civil society need to work itself, it's a think like itself, need to work with experts, we need to study this experience, because if we don't study historical aspects about environmental recovery and its legal provisions which can help to supply it. We can wait even more than 10 years. In my opinion, first of all, we need to, with collaboration with some members of Ukrainian parliament, we need to start to work on the draft of this environmental regulation, which will implement all possible and all needed things. It might be the first step, because if we will have, for example, a very brief roadmap, which will include, for example, we studied Kuwait experience, European experience, etc., 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 and we can make an offer. We need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and for example, here is, for example, the draft. And any member of parliament, he has a subject of this law initiative, he can bring this draft before Ukrainian parliament, and this draft may become as a law. In my opinion, it's the best possible way to start to do anything on this issue.
I think we need to add to discussion Alena Varuha, because she raises issue in her presentation about the programs of management and the legislation in this area. What do you think it is stopping us to making our steps much faster, I would say? Because in Ukraine, it's like it takes decades actually to create some plan. Later we create strategy. Later maybe we will have a law, and this law is writing maybe 5-7 years. And through all these 20 years, one generation is already grow up or going to be born, and people are starting to forget why we are start all these processes and how to make it faster, how to make it in people mind, in our government mind, in expert mind. It's important, it should be raised, and how to give a power to the civil society, because I would say war shows that civil society is very strong, but how to show our civil society that they have voice in the low level?
It's very, in my opinion, if it's possible, I'll give answer some remarks. I believe in such situation, I believe only in Ukrainian courts. Because, court cannot, for example, dismiss any application or any lawsuit only because there are no legislation. In such case, suit can apply analogy of the law, analogy of the law system, for example. If we will show, for example, it's in my opinion, due to the collective lawsuit, collective class action, that it is possible, for example, to do very positive thing to get recovery for environmental, etc. Environmental. So that's why we can, based on the foreign legal ground and foreign legal experience, and this decision will become enforced. In that way, we can show to other governing bodies, okay, if you do not agree with such position of the court, okay, please give us another option, another position. But do something, not to do something, it's not a decision. My opinion, we need to act. Action is much better than doing nothing, in fact. Courts, it's one of the way.
Okay. Is there any feedback to the Artemi thoughts and his position? Mr. Monorenko?
We don't hear you.
We can't hear you. You're still muted. Okay. We can't hear you.
Я пошел.
Yeah.
Зараз.
Sorry,
Now I hear
could
you.
you please repeat? Very bad sound.
Repeat one more time. Yeah, it's my humble opinion, but we need to act, because action is much better than doing nothing. My opinion that better possible way to show the state that they need to change something in their legislation is to go to the courts, directly to the Ukrainian courts. And when there are no specialized legislation, court cannot dismiss any lawsuit, any application, because there are no legislation. They, in such way, they must apply foreign an analogy of law, or for analogy of.
Sorry. Don't hear anything.
Now I don't hear
I hear.
anything too. What I hear you, Valery, but I don't hear our participants
Third time.
and the organizer. So what you are muted, guys.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll find the problem here.
Yes, okay.
Now, do you hear us?
Can you hear us?
With a little interruption.
Now I hear you.
Mm-hmm.
No. I will briefly, in third time, repeat my position. So that we must go to Ukrainian courts. Courts must apply legislation Ukrainian. If there are no legislation, they will use analogy of law system, and will apply for example, for some foreign experience. If we will prove that, for example, in Belgian courts use European and domestic legislation mixed in such way, in the US in such way, and we think that because there are no legislation in Ukraine, please use foreign legislation. It's a very complicated question, but it is one of the ways in what we can achieve any change in our legislation. Because
you
for
mean
example,
our Ukrainian legislation?
I mean, yes.
So,
if we were
unfortunately,
saying,
I had just 15 minutes. It's impossible to discuss all the points and show all our work on this direction. So, Ukrainian, of course, we integrate the experience of the countries, but we have our own way. And we need some steps to produce our own specific legislation, which will be in our realities. So we work with Verkhovna Rada, we work with Cabinet of Ministers, we work with NGOs, and we include all the players in this process. So if I right understand your question.
No, you know, generally, Mr. Malenik, it was not a question. It was maybe it's like a thesis about
discussion point.
Yes, discussion bullet point how we can avoid this lack of Ukrainian legislation, because any law procedures can take very long time.
So it was done a big
especially
work,
concerning, unfortunately, environmental situation. Yeah.
So
we have, I think you know it.
Now we have association agreement with Europe. There are a lot of points in this document which Ukraine must
implement,
develop,
yes,
must produce. So we work on this, and we try to harmonize Ukrainian legislation with European legislation. Is a state politic in Ukraine.
Yes, but from the other side, in the European Union, there are a lot of acts like EU regulations that have it can be used directly, not without implementing. Directive is an act which must be implemented by every member state and by Ukraine according to obligations under this agreement, association agreement.
I see. But
But that's why we need to use this legislation and try to implement it in our Ukrainian law system. If it's impossible, we can try to use analogy of law and to prove before, for example, Ukrainian courts that it's possible to apply these provisions. That is my position as a lawyer.
So
maybe.
it's a very good thought that we just it's such a way as you're talking about, just to take European legislation and implement. It's called I can be mistaken. It's called method of the cover, when you just take a European directive and use it as you see it. And sometimes the things that are established by this directive are not integrated with our reality, because every statement needs to mechanism to implement. So you just cannot take a law and use it today. In a way, sometimes it's really possible. It's such a kind of implementations in our standardization systems called covers method. But it's very rare situations. And I saw such documents. Sometimes they were provided by Google Translator. And I saw, for example, law on organic production. And in this law on such a method, where the sentence that cow should smile when you killed it. It was a translation. It was a document translated by Google Translated on organic production. So and so it was a very funny. It's such a kind of problem. So we have a shadow, lack of legislation. We needed time. We needed human resources to provide such an implementation. So lack of legislation is a problem that we face with. But we have also a plan. We have a website, eurointegration.com, probably, with a schedule of which legislation act we apply or which are under development. So we have a schedule. Sometimes we are under the schedule, and because of war also. But for example, as an example, Mr. Angie, if I didn't, am I right with you, Nick? Sorry, because I don't have it. So
Yes.
You wish us, for example, not to focus on a cheaper when we are starting to recover as speedy, in a speedy way. So not focus on the cheapest ways of such a recovery. And we are on the way to this, because we are not expect for a cheap recovery as for now, because we are actively, for example, I'm involved in this processes. We are implemented a sustainable public procurement system in Ukraine. And since all the procurements for military, for recovery, many of huge variety, main part of procurements will be curated, will be provided by the government. And the government is now actively implement system of sustainable public procurements. It means that the product which purchased by government purchased not because of the cheap price, but also taking into account other aspects, such as life cycle of this product, of this construction. So we are not buy now something just because it's cheap, but we are assessing a life cycle of building of products, and it's our future. So we are really expect a recovery on a quite new quality level. We are not expecting that it will be quick and cheap. So it's just as an example on how we act with a lack of law. So, for example, we are Living Planet. We have 5 years to implement a system of public procurements and made a great success in this direction. So we not so bad as it seems from your speech, from your thoughts, from your speech. So thank you.
Thank you, Svetlana. Yeah. We would like to have the last comment if somebody has to add to this conversation. If not, I will start summarizing our meeting. So, if there is no comments, I will summarizing today our meeting. So we was here 2 sessions today. One about influence of the Russian armed aggression on the climate change and Ukraine, Europe in a single ecological complex, problems of preservation of critical ecological infrastructure. So our intention was very broad because we heard about threats to the ecological security. We heard about new challenges for Ukraine in the condition of war. We talk about dangerous waste as one of the challenges to the ecological critical infrastructures. Today was raised a new topic about environmental health in Ukraine and how it's dangerous when we are not really acting in this way. We even talk about nuclear blackmail as a threat to ecological security. And modern challenges and threats to the environment and critical ecological infrastructure in cyberspace. Now we are living in the time where cybersecurity plays a huge role, and we need to take all those in our future plans, how we will develop environmental protection in our country and in all European. Also, we have very broad representation of Chernobyl radiation ecological biosphere reserve, as I talk about how reserve survived during the invasion of Russian Federation and the problems that comes after post-occupation period. We heard about European research infrastructure, which is important how to connect our researchers with wider community. And also we talk about management of nature protected territories of Ukraine according to the European standards. And we have very good, interesting comment from our representative of the European Commissions about our Euro integration actions and how maybe it should so look like. So I'm highly appreciate all participants here in Brussels, in Ukrainian Civil Society Hub, who present today, spent whole day with us on discussion of these important topics. I would like to say thank you to all our participants who stay with us all day long online, and highly appreciation to all our speakers because they raised very important topics and prepared all information very high professional level, which really always time underlines that Ukrainian experts are very highly professionals, but we need to spend more time how to show them to the bigger community, how to connect our people with the whole world to show that expertise of Ukraine is very interesting and could be shared and many case studies could be created. So thank you to everybody, and I give the floor to the Irina Chernichenko. She will make a closing remarks, please.
Thank you. Today there are very fruitful discussion and expert commentaries. Thank you everyone for your active participation. We have seen a serious discussion on the issues of climate change and the consequences of the armed aggression of the Russian Federation against Ukraine, or the ecology of Ukraine, Europe. The recording of our roundtable we published of YouTube and social networks for a wide range of the global community. As a next step, we have planned to hold a conference with the aim of finding common ways with leading experts to form future roadmap. Once again, I thank everyone and hope for future cooperation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, this is last. That's all. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all, guys, for such an interesting day. And thank you, special thanks to Natalia for a brilliant organization. And so see you.
My pleasure. See you.
Thank you.